I kindly ask to F11 to take place for the next presentation. It will be about developing a sense of responsibility in an age of manipulation.
Hi, hello. First of all, what I want to do is I want to clarify that I'm actually an anthropologist. And I feel that's important to explain because I come from a tradition that's quite different from the sort of different traditions that sort of are more concerned about studying objects of art and design as themselves, as objects of art and design, and sort of try to extract semiotic meanings out of them. The tradition of thinking that I come from happens to be one that is more concerned about what objects, whether they're design or whether they're artistic objects or whether even music, immaterial objects. Well, the tradition I come from is more concerned about what these objects do in societies. So I'm not going to go further into explaining why this tradition is, in my opinion, justified. I find that it's like a fundamental philosophical thing that I happen to buy into. I don't expect everyone to be convinced by it. It's just the methodology. So, second thing is I want to talk a bit about the two projects in research that I'm doing right now. One is about urban gentrification and the role of art institutions in urban gentrification. And the second one is about video game development, independent video game developers and communities of players that surround them. Now, when I first say this, the two subjects don't really sound very related to each other. And they might not be, but in my mind, they're kind of related to each other. I'm not sure how convinced you will be by this, which will be interesting to see as well. But first, I want to talk about the role of my first project, the role of art in urban gentrification. Now, I came to start to think of this project as very important. First of all, okay, gentrification basically means, put it euphemistically, is when you have like a neighborhood that is sort of working class or poor, basically, and in most sort of countries in Europe, ethnically diverse as well. So when you have neighborhoods like this, when these neighborhoods are sort of renovated in favor of sort of bringing a sort of higher class or upper middle class residents into them and entirely change the texture of the neighborhood, this process is called gentrification. And I have noticed that the art institution itself has a very, very important role in sort of precipitating the speed of this urban gentrification. So going back to what I've said first, as an anthropologist, what I'm really interested in is what art does to society. And I looked around to see what art does to society, and there are obviously a multitude of things. But this was the one that, in my mind, was requiring immediate attention. It is a question that every artist, I think, should be immediately concerned about. It is an immediate problem that needs an immediate answer right now. And a lot of people would also argue that art has always had a part to play in urban gentrification, even since like 19th century, but it's still happening and it still needs to be solved. And basically, the research I'm doing right now is a comparative study. I reside in Taipei, I'm Turkish, and I've lived in the UK before. So what I'll be doing is like have a comparative study of how art and sort of gallery systems basically are responsible for gentrifying neighborhoods, both in London, in Taipei, and in Istanbul. So if this is not clear, what's happening here is basically sort of a gallerist would go to some poor neighborhood and they'll be like, oh, well, look at that, isn't that wonderful? I mean, there's people who are sort of washing their dishes on the pavement, and I can look at that as an artist, I can be inspired by that, this is fantastic. And the rent is really cheap, I can get by myself like a massive studio and live here forever. As these artists move in, and as they start opening galleries, the cost of these houses rise immediately, massively. And the people who have to live there, who were living there and working nearby, they have to get sort of kicked out of these places. So that's the first project I'm working on. Basically, it's a comparative study of 3 cities and how urban gentrification and art has a different effect on urban gentrification in 3 different contexts. In 3 different cultural contexts where art is done differently, state agency is done differently, business is done differently, et cetera, et cetera. My second research, also, if you need a clue about what kind of question you want to ask, I would love to explain more about the details of how 3 cities are different in the sense of gentrification.